I'll build on what Claire presented earlier by focusing in on the slice of the total productivity ecosystem as described by both Claire and Jens. And to start with, as part of the project, we then had to carry out extensive consultations with our key partners within government, labor, and employers on various priorities, but specifically towards selecting particular sectors which will represent the slice as shown earlier, which is kind of overlaid on the productivity ecosystem, and also creating strong evidence base to select those sectors so there wouldn't be random or top down, but rather from the bottom up. I'll skip those ones. And this is a visual representation. I hope you can see the graph on the right-hand side, which captures the nature of the challenge of productivity. On the top is an iceberg, but beneath that are the various drivers of productivity. So what you see at the top is the challenges of productivity. The approach of the project is to drill underneath the iceberg and identify particular drivers of productivity within the ecosystem. So low labor productivity, wages, the infrastructure, skills, and so forth and so on. All these things ultimately contribute to productivity that we see at the top. But unless you drill beneath that, you won't see those drivers. And so we had to do that. And one way of doing that was what we call the market systems analysis. We worked through technical analysis and also participation by what is called the Project Advisory Committee, which is made up of members of various unions, the government, and the business, the employers, which this very committee is chaired, by the way, by the representative of Productivity South Africa. And Productivity South Africa also happens to be our direct partner in the project. So we work with them directly as a partner and indirectly as chair of the productivity ecosystem. So through both technical analysis and the participation of members of the productivity of the Project Advisory Committee, as well as the DITC, Department of Industry, Trade, Competition, we managed to come up with 2 sectors based on the market systems analysis. But before I even proceed further, I want to share a visual representation of trends in productivity in South Africa, at least over the past 30 years. And you see the one on the left-hand, top left, is, I can't see the numbers from here, and Jens has taken the laptop away, but where you see the decline is actually around 2008, 2009, following the global recession. Interestingly enough, before that, South Africa actually had a strong productivity growth, so much so that even after the Asian financial crisis, it managed to recover. It wasn't until the 2008-2009 global financial crisis that productivity actually began to decline steadily. The one on the top right-hand side is productivity in the manufacturing sector. The one on the top left-hand side is the primary sector. The one on the top right-hand side is the manufacturing sector, which also declined right around that same time, 2008, 2009. And then the one at the bottom is the services sector, where productivity kind of flatlined, with a lot of workers moving from manufacturing and so forth. And then ultimately, the one at the bottom shows economic growth in South Africa between 1990 and 2001. Again, you see from where you have the red bar, from the second one from the right, that's where productivity or economic growth began to decline steeply. So that provides us with the context in which we had to work, or the context in which we had to introduce the project. Now, here's a speculation of some of the plausible causes of this decline in productivity. The top left-hand side shows a decline in foreign or gross capital formation starting from 2006. It declined steadily, and as you heard from the previous presentations, investment is critical to growing productivity. The one at the top right-hand side, it's staggered, but you see a general decline in foreign direct investment. And then once you get to the bottom right-hand side, there's a decline in manufacturing. I think someone mentioned that. Manufacturing trends, manufacturing share of exports, for example, increased from 38% in 1994 to 61% in 2003, and then declined to 39% by 2020. At the bottom is manufacturing share of total economic output, or GDP. That has also declined from 21% to almost 12%. Now, in selecting, we had 12 different criteria to select the two sectors. I'm not going to go through all of them because we're going to share the presentation. But one, they had to have a potential for creating employment and decent work, and they also had to have a potential for productivity growth and even spill over to other sectors. There are 10 of them. We don't have time, so I'm going to skip the details of it. And I think I've mentioned this already. We handled the technical analysis, extensive consultations, industry associations, responsible government agencies, DTIC, Department of Small Business Development, AITF, Automotive Industry Transformation Fund. Ultimately, we selected two sectors. One is the automotive sector in South Africa. There's another graph which is not here, but you see a steady decline in the automotive sector from 2017 onwards. And this is the biggest sector in the manufacturing broader sector, so it must be of concern to everyone. So the automotive sector was selected, and then we also chose the leather and leather goods sector, a fascinating sector with a lot of issues there. And these two were subjected to market systems analysis to identify the underlying causes of low or declining productivity in that sector. So for the automotive sector, for example, we, in general, in terms of, we can talk about productivity. There's been a kind of a general description of productivity, but still there are levels of productivity in terms of refinement. So in the case of South Africa, PSA, Productivity South Africa does a very good job of measuring productivity statistics periodically, and I believe the last report was October last year. But then we also agree that there is always room for improvement. And so, for example, they measure primarily productivity per worker. And the agreement between us is that we can improve it by having productivity per hour worked. Because you have a worker who is probably on leave, annual leave, or maybe sick at home or something like that, and that you are counting that towards productivity. But if you zero in on hours worked, then you have a more refined measurement. So we are working, we're in the early stages of collaborating with Productivity South Africa on that. And we even want to expand that further, or disaggregate that further, to look at productivity within SMEs compared to larger ones. Productivity along gender dimensions, productivity among women and male and female workers. We also are looking into spatial breakdown, because some of the provinces have raised issues that the national statistics may not always reflect what is going on in their particular provinces. Because you may have negative growth in one province and maybe double-digit positive growth in another province. But if you take an average, it's going to disguise the one that's reflected there. We're also working with NACAM. That's the National Association of Automobile Component and Allied Manufacturers. That is to help or support the government's very critical agenda of transformation and localization. We've met with them. They have several tiers of suppliers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. We are working primarily with tier 2 aspect of the automobile supply chain. We are also engaged with the Department of Small
Mr. Thompson,
Business. 1
minute left.
No problem at all. I'll wrap it up. So we are dealing with the Small Business Development Association. We are providing support in terms of SMEs development and formalization of some of the SMEs that are not in the formal sector. Department of Employment, we've already worked with them to draft a national employment policy. And then capacity development for unions, private sector, we're working with BUSA, for example. Government to demystify productivity also. So beyond the technical definitions and all that, we thought as part of our awareness creation to bring productivity, explain it in living color so that the business person knows what it means, the worker knows what it means. This is the last slide, which portrays the virtuous cycle of productivity increases, which lead to higher wages. Higher wages, of course, leads to a wider base for government taxation. A wider base for government taxation leads to higher revenue yield, which means government's capacity to invest in infrastructure, which leads to what we call systemic drivers of productivity. So that, for instance, electricity, if electricity supply improves, it improves for all businesses, and then the cycle goes on. The arrow at the top reflects the outward or the external benefits of productivity or international competitiveness, because we believe also that once you export more, you create more space to create more employment. I hope I managed to finish in my way. Yes. Thank you very much.